Hmm.
So yeah, I'm super overwhelmed right now because about a week ago, I saw this post on LinkedIn that really resonated with me. It was from this woman named Jillian Richardson, and it was like a hilarious post about like being weird on LinkedIn. And I was like, wow, like this really struck a chord with so many people. It was like blowing up, going super viral. Um, and like I've been sort of like trying to grow on LinkedIn for a while now to use it like both for Beehive, like my job, from partnership opportunities, also just like personal brand. Like I'm a very big believer in that. So I took a page basically from that playbook and basically like started talking about being weird on LinkedIn and like asked people to tag like the weirdest person they know on LinkedIn or whatever. And the post blew up like probably it's gotten probably now like a quarter of a million in impressions. It's gotten like yeah, 1,000 comments maybe, and then like I kept posting like in this weird style. It's been like 3 days now, and like all the posts, none have blown up like to that extent, but a lot of them have blown up. And like the DMs that I was getting, like it was deeply resonating with people. They were like, "Oh my gosh, like we need this. We need more people like being weird and normalizing being weird on LinkedIn." And like the way that I'm trained to think, like both from Beehive and everything, it's like first product market fit, but then
Mm.
like in the social media newsletter world, we have content market fit, and I was like, this is the strongest content market fit I've ever seen in my life, where like so many people are looking towards this, towards like a community and everything like that. So quickly I messaged Jillian, who was like the first person that I got inspiration from, and I was like, let's start something. So we like just rolled out. It's called Corporate Chaos Club. And I don't know exactly what it's going to be right now. It's just like going to be a newsletter, um, and it could evolve into other things. But I was saying it's like one of the things that I need to work on, and maybe this is where like the group therapy in the podcast comes from. It's just like I love taking on new projects, and it's very exciting for me. But sometimes it's hard for me to sort of find that balance. Like obviously, Beehive is priority number one. This is a cool side project. Like the podcast to me is just something fun and interesting. But that's enough ranting.
That's amazing, dude. So, how do they define weirdo? Is it in different ways or?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think part of the reason why this is blowing up now, it's like the Industrial Revolution, right? Like you have all those people that are excited about it, and I'm for sure excited about our Industrial Revolution, which is AI. But at the same time, you have like the Luddites, which are the people who like fought against that. And I think like anyone who uses socials, especially LinkedIn, has just been scrolling through LinkedIn is like, that's ChatGPT, that's AI generated, that's an AI comment. And like it's sort of annoying a lot of people and it makes sense. And so I just think like the one thing AI can't do yet, or I haven't seen it do well yet, is just injecting raw personality. So weirdness is it's subjective. One of the things for me, and like this could lead us to an interesting conversation, is I I'm a Torah observant Jew, and like we're gonna get into that. So like the person that I'm working with, Jillian, who's awesome, I basically told her, and she's not Jewish, but like she lives in Brooklyn, so she's around some Jews, and I was telling her that like I really want to do this, but I like in my content and like in the newsletter, I never want to curse. Like that's something I'm really strict on, is like not cursing. And then also like not being political and being appropriate, which obviously is like a sliding scale for some people. So that's one of the things that might sometimes be a challenge, and like I really try to stay true to. But obviously that means a lot of things for a lot of different people.
I love this. I had a post a couple weeks ago that
Yeah,
didn't go as big as that, but it was
yeah,
something along the same lines, which was there's so much AI, and I think everyone sees it and everyone feels it.
yeah,
And the only differentiator you have is to be yourself and to be authentic. And that's it. Now it's gonna get interesting when you can train an AI off of all of the content you've created.
yeah,
But I mean, I see this stuff all the time. You get the automated messages. Probably ignore most of them. I have people reaching out to me saying, "How do you create, a tool to message 50 people at a time or 100
yeah,
people at a time?" And it's like, you know, go just be authentic. Really, I've seen it, and you're following your interests when it comes to different projects that you're doing and taking on. And sometimes you have to kill them. Sometimes you have to do just something different. But that's it. Like follow the excitement. Be authentic.
100%.
That's what I've seen play out.
100%. One of the things that I'm most excited for here, and like started we can get to if anyone's listening, like who the heck we are and what we're doing here, is the thing that I'll do when I start a project right away is like I will sort of do an analysis on how draining is this for me versus like how fun and rewardful this is. And one of the reasons I was excited to like launch some sort of podcast is because to me, like I talk a lot, and just talking with someone who is like similar to me, I think is like a very fun and interesting thought experiment. And then I was like, maybe some people could benefit from this. And to me, it sounds just like a fun thing to do. So I'm not putting so much pressure on this, and I think that's where you have the most fun. So that's sort of the idea for it here. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, man, I've like lived my life with that ethos. Like
Yeah,
I can tell right away if I'm at a job, and I've seen this in my past, where if something starts becoming draining and I'm not
100%.
excited about it, my performance dwindles and it's painful and everything just seems like a problem. It all has to do with like what color glasses you wear. If
Yeah,
you're like in a positive mood, good mood, excited, then everything's working out, you're connecting, you're flowing. And I've seen it in my experience as well. If I'm like down or whatever and I'm not excited about it and drained, everything is just a battle. But I think that's some people would say the universe or God or whatever guiding you and telling you what projects to pursue, who to work with, and who not
100%.
to work with. And sometimes it's not that the experience you're in, whether it's a job or project, wasn't the right thing at the time, but sometimes there's an end that has to come to these things.
I love that. Yeah,
So, have you experienced that as well, kind of in your own
for
work
sure.
experience, life experience, bouncing around?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, at least for like the stage where I'm at now, we're like still young, like fairly fresh out of school. It comes down to for me like who I'm working with, and like I think that's with the company also. Part of the reason I love working at Beehive is the people there are just good people, and like also very ambitious and smart and driven. So I think that's like the most important thing for me when I get involved in something now is like who I'm working with. And if I see that it's not, I'm not vibing with that other person, um, I'll call it quits. And I'm also, I mean, for better or for worse, I also like if I'm not enjoying something, like I have no problem stopping to do it. Obviously, like one of the big things with life in Judaism and business and everything is like when you start something, it's going to be extremely exciting, obviously, and then like at some point you're going to hit reality. So I'm obviously aware and try to be cautious of that, but I'm talking about just something being draining more from the start.
That's interesting. I've when I look back at my experience, one thing that I've had to learn over time is pushing past that initial excitement.
For sure.
Because I'm a designer, so I can take any idea and start creating software and stuff like that and kind of getting it out there, getting it out of my head. Some people have that issue. I don't have that issue as much. And design is only one piece of a business of
Yeah.
software or whatever, and you need to do hundreds of other things in order to get into people's hands.
Yeah.
And so I definitely, when I started my career when I was 22, I would start a lot of different projects and not push through.
For sure.
And I realized that like most of the work happens like after the first 30 days. You just keep
100%.
pushing, keep building, and then just like again, following the excitement.
100%. I heard the first 90% of podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes.
Three
So,
episodes?
3 episodes, I believe.
Why do you think it's three and not 10 or
I'm
whatever
not
other
sure. I
number?
think like one is like, okay, let's just like doing what we're doing right now. We might as well try it. I think two is like, like we have to give it, whatever. I think three, three's the lucky charm type of thing. Like, three strikes and you're out. I don't know. It seems pretty arbitrary, but um for anyone listening also now, this is Jake and I's first time actually. I mean, we spoke briefly when I was on my way to the hotel, and that was probably under a week ago. Now it's our first time not meeting face to face, but meeting virtually face to face. I gotta say, just leading it off, you have an awesome head of hair. I'm very impressed. For Jewish males, I mean, there's a reason why I'm wearing a hat. and I'm very impressed.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess luck of the draw. I've baldness on one side, not bald on the other, but who knows? I
Yeah,
hope it stays that way. No gray hairs yet either.
yeah,
And I'm 32, so not bad.
nice.
Not
That's
bad.
huge.
But
Maybe
again, I think it's following the excitement. I don't know. I think some of it's nature, some of it's nurture, but
for sure.
definitely like if you're excited about things, staying healthy, whatever, it all kind of leads into that. Now, you were talking about habits, and we have a concept in Judaism that it takes like 30 times, right, for something to become a
Mm.
habit. Are you familiar with that?
I know a chazaka where it's like when you do something 3 times, then it's like
Mm.
you're like set in to do it. I'm not sure about the 30.
Yeah, well, I'm not a rabbi, so I will have to find that source and get it to you. But yeah, I thought it was something that like after 30 days of doing something, we assume that, you did the thing that if you did it for 30 days straight.
Uh,
Yeah, are you familiar? Like if you
I thought it was 3.
said
I thought it
you
was
thought it
3.
was so no, three is a chazaka. That
3 is
is
a
one of
chazaka.
them.
Okay.
But I think it's like if we had Mashiva Roch and Geshem, we're saying that for 30 days in Shmona
Uh,
Esrei. Then if it's after that and you don't know, we assume that you did the right one because you've supposedly been doing it for 30 days straight. Which kind of, if you
yeah,
look at a lot of like habits, like any book, whatever, a lot of them talk about 21 days, 30 days, 40 days,
for
right?
sure. I think yeah, I think that sounds familiar. I know like it's like 90 tefillot of that, so that would make like obviously 3 times a day, 30. So
Yep.
that makes sense. If you're a rabbi listening, let us know if
Yep.
Jake over here is onto something. Um, very cool. Should we just do like back up for a second? Like, who the heck are we? Like, what are we doing here? If someone's very confused listening to this.
Yeah, please take it away. Bechavod, as we say.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So, first off, Jake is a very brave man, and I'll explain why in a second here. Um, I'll give a quick intro on myself and then pass it off to Jake. So my name is Alec Kremins. I am originally from New York. I made Aliyah about a year and a half ago at this point. I made Aliyah November 2023, about a month after October 7th. Whole podcast episode of its own. And I currently live in Yerushalayim with my wife. Got married about 4.5 months ago, so definitely still in Shana Rishona, enjoying that very much. Shout out to my wife Tamar. And yeah, I live here in Jerusalem. I work at a company called Beehive, email newsletter platform. As you heard from my therapy session in the beginning of the podcast, I do a whole host of things, including a local newsletter called the JLM Scoop about different things happening in Yerushalayim. Now this weird LinkedIn project and this extremely fun podcast, which we're starting. And I have to give it to Jake because I had this idea and I posted in a group chat, or I had someone post in this like Jews in Tech group chat for me about this crazy idea I had. Got a few DMs, but one that definitely stood out was Jake who hit me up, and we hopped on the phone, and now we're here, and I'll let him do his own intro, and yeah, that's it for me.
That's cool, man. Well, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more, and I'm already having fun with this. So thank you for letting us hit the record button and start this up. So my name is Jake Rogelberg. Like I mentioned, I'm 32. Been married for just over 10 years, which sounds
Wow.
crazy. Actually met my wife Arnie in Israel in front of Coffee Bean on
Nice.
Yafo. Facebook was still a thing at the time. I mean, I guess it's still a little bit, but we became Facebook friends, stayed in touch kind of loosely, and we're set up a couple years later. Got married, and thank God we have 3 kids. My oldest daughter's 8, and my twins are 5. So that's
Wow.
kind of family wise. We thought we were going to stay in the United States, bought a house late 2020 in the Philly suburbs. So we thought we're staying here. This is great. And about 3 years ago, started thinking about, moving to Israel. And really a lot of that had to do with kind of my studies in Breslov Hasidus, but also just the regular, Talmud and Siddur and everything, and just the emphasis on living in Eretz Yisrael. And I thought if I didn't do this, and again, it was a family discussion, there's a constellation of factors, but if I didn't do this, I would regret it. So we made the move 6 months ago to
Wow.
central Israel, Beit Shemesh, and we're just starting to kind of get settled down, make friends, got the bookshelves up, starting to get settled. And I started a solo design agency for about 4 months ago called Good Vibes. And I work with different startup founders, helping them build anything from pitch decks to web apps to mobile apps to websites, whatever they need to raise capital and then build software and get it to the US market. So currently working with 2 different Israeli founders, having a blast with that. And yeah, just kind of building that out. And then I have another side project, which is a mobile app geared to help people overcome behavioral addictions. Specifically, we're starting with pornography. So very excited about that. And that first version of the app should ship in about 6 weeks. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
One thing I got to say for that whole intro. Playing around.
You gotta show me how to do that.
Yeah, just a little round of applause from the studio audience. No, and that's a lot of the reason why when Jake reached out, I thought that he'd be a perfect to have as a co-host on this. I think we have a lot in common, and I could maybe just say like my vision of what I was thinking of beforehand, and obviously this could go in so many directions. But sort of what I was thinking about is I think that there are a lot of people that are in the working world that are in, whether they be in tech or they're a founder, entrepreneur, in finance, whatever it is, that are feeling a sort of connection with their Jewish identity that they didn't really feel as strongly before October 7th, and now they're sort of feeling this resurgence. And also a lot of people that are starting to look towards Israel as like an actual real option, both Olim, which are people that are already here that are sort of trying to figure out how to make it work, and also people who are still in the States trying to figure out like whether Israel could be an option. And I guess like I had a lot of conversations with friends both in the US and in Israel, people that are, have different these, are either, religious, some of them might not be religious, some of them speak Hebrew, some of them don't speak Hebrew. But I think there's a lot of things to just talk about that I have fun speaking about in an unscripted way, whether it relates to business and tech, or on the other side of the things like Judaism, religion, Israel. And I thought it'd be cool to just sit down for whatever it is, an hour a week, have some conversations with a like-minded individual that hopefully other people can benefit from. So that was sort of the idea. Who knows where it's going to go? But yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Very excited to get into it. So, where should we start? I mean, there's a lot of threads to pull on there. We can talk about you making Aliyah about a year and a half ago and kind of what the first year and a half is like. And I can kind of touch on what the first 6 months is like. And also what it's like getting married, and being married for a few months after you moved.
For sure. We can also do what should the name of the podcast be? We're playing with some ideas there. I think you wrote down a question, which most of this is unscripted, but we were thinking of some questions about like what was the moment that you realized you wanted to make Aliyah? That's something that I was thinking of a little bit. So I'll actually turn your question on you, and I would love to hear if there was a specific moment that like stands out where you realize, okay, I have to uproot everything in New York, sell the house, or not in New York, sorry, in Philly, uproot the house and move to Israel.
Great question. And I would go even a little further where it's where were you when you had that idea? Now, I know like with these things, sometimes it builds over time, but at a certain point, like it kind of hits you.
Yeah.
So I was starting to think about it for a little bit. Like we are in very unique times.
Yeah.
And I was thinking this, feeling it before October 7th, right? I didn't move to Israel because I felt any pressure of rising anti-Semitism, me personally. America has always been such an awesome place to live. The Jewish community is great. Everyone else is great. Obviously, in a very big country, if you have a very small percentage of people that, have problems with other people, like they can be loud. But honestly, like I had such a great experience. I go back and visit. I have family there. So it wasn't like a push from America to go to Israel. It was just, hey, like my people lived here thousands of years ago, and we can literally unearth rocks and find, fossils, and we have all this history, and it's so fun. Like, I have so many good experiences. And so it was really that. But I do at the time I was doing like very early morning walking meditations.
Mm.
So it wasn't like this like epiphany, but I just remember like I was listening to a WhatsApp message from my friend who was just like teaching a regular Torah class or whatever, and we have this concept that Hashem or God really pays attention to every single thing that's happening in Israel. Of course, he pays attention to the entire world, but he takes a special like
Mm.
look at what is happening in Israel. And for some reason, that really resonated with me, where I was like, I want to be in a place where I can feel closer to God and
Mm.
feel God's presence more openly. And so it was really a spiritual pull to Eretz Yisrael, and I can definitely feel it does feel different. I feel the history. I feel just connected when I'm here. So that's where I was. I remember I was actually outside of a synagogue they were
Wow.
just starting to pray, or like around 6 a.m. So that's where I
Wow.
was. It was still kind of night out. They were trying to hit the nates, so they kind of start before sunrise and then line up Shemona Esrei with sunrise. So just remember it was kind of early morning.
Wow. I have so many questions, so many follow-up questions. But maybe first I'll sort of try to answer that question too, and then we could dive into it. I don't actually I think I remember where I was. I had this idea of like moving to Israel for a long time. I think growing up, like my mom's Israeli, my grandparents live here in Jerusalem, pretty close to me, thankfully, which is amazing. So I grew up coming here all the time. I felt a special connection. I think it came from after my freshman year at the University of Michigan. I must have been, I guess, 19 or whatever. I went on Birthright, and I remember on Birthright, we were, I think it was Har Herzl. I think they took us to Har Herzl. And I remember they were taking us to a certain lone soldier who was killed, and I don't remember exactly his name. I think he might have actually been from Philadelphia. I could try to pull up after, but I don't remember
Is his picture also in Marzipan? Like in, do you know what I'm talking
potentially.
about?
Potentially, I'm not sure. I think he passed away either in the he was killed either early in the 2000s or the late 90s. Um, but I remember we were sort of by his kever there, the whole group, and then the madrich started, like the tour guide started talking about like the sacrifices people make for Israel, and then like everyone just started singing Hatikva, national anthem. And I remember just feeling like goosebumps all over my body. And I'm someone I'm pretty patriotic, like in terms of America as well. Like, where I was born, where I grew up, I'm an American citizen. I am very patriotic, but I've heard the national anthem of the US probably hundreds, if not thousands of times, and I've never had that reaction. It's always okay, I'm ready for the baseball game to start or whatever. And of course, salute to all of the troops. My grandfather was in the US Navy, so I always felt very proud, but it never elicited that same very intense emotional reaction. And I sort of think in that moment when I was on Har Herzl, I was like, you know what? There's a certain depth here that exists in Israel, and I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to echo something you started with, there are a lot of weirdos here. So no, but in the best, I mean that in the best possible way.
For sure.
And you could find them. Like, I literally love just like meeting people all the time. I'm sure you've met a lot of people and expanded your network, and there's just a
100%.
lot of interesting people here.
Tons of interesting people, and that's one of the been that's been one of the things that's been the most fun, honestly. And yeah, I remember just another point that I want to talk about because I think it's an interesting jumping point. It's something that I realized in my life is that I sort of have this framework where I live life by, wherever I'm at a crossroads where I have a difficult decision to make, I think about both decisions and I think about which is the harder decision, like which is the harder path to take. And about 90% of the time, I think that's the correct path. at least for me. Like in terms of making Aliyah and not making Aliyah, especially right after a war, like the easiest thing to do is to not. But one of the pillars that I live my life by is like your life's not supposed to be easy. That's something that I believe. Like it's nice to have, it's nice to have what you need, and I'm not talking about that. Like we shouldn't experience hardships for no reason. But I think what we're after and what we're chasing, and part of the reason why we're both Torah observant Jews is that we're after meaning, and I think everyone's craving meaning. And it's so interesting because one of the things I've noticed about living in Israel is life is definitely not easier. I mean, I don't know if you've been here long enough to like run into bomb shelters in the middle of the night, but it's not something that you have all the time. But like there's a certain meaning that exists here that I just have never felt anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. It's definitely hard to wake up in the middle of the night into a bomb, go run into a bomb shelter. I would say it's harder to live without Amazon that
Mm.
comes, in a day or two. No, but like there is some truth to it. Of
Yeah.
course, like I gave that up. It comes in 2.5 weeks, but um, sometimes instead of just like swiping, a button in the app and ordering something that you need, for your home or whatever it is, or for the kids, it's now a 45-minute errand. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of time, and if you're doing an hour podcast here and you're building an app there, whatever it is, like that's a lot of time. So you got to really prioritize. But I really resonate with the point that you brought up, which was around going for the hard things.
Yeah.
It just seems to be some universal law that exists in this experience, this human
Mm.
experience, right? That hard things bring meaning, right? So even if you look at like working out in the gym, like that's painful, right? That's hard.
Yeah.
You got to wake up, you got to do that, you got to recover from it, but it's obviously really rewarding to feel healthy and but that goes for everything. So
100%. I am. If anyone's listening and they like don't understand what we're talking about with Amazon packages, I'll explain what it's like getting a package here in Israel. What it's like is that you order something, okay, on Amazon or whatever it is, and then about a month goes by, or like 2 weeks if you're lucky, and then you're like sitting at your desk. It's like a random Wednesday, and you get a call from a random Israeli number, and you pick up the call, and it's some guy only speaking in Hebrew, and he's like, I'm outside with your package, and you might be in a work meeting, or you might be on a walk, or you might be, in like your case, picking up your kid from Gone. And if you were, I've literally taken buses from my apartment to like the middle of Baca just to meet a delivery guy and pick up a package. Like it is the most bizarre process.
you get stuff in a week? I mean, that's lucky, man. Usually I'm like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's a really interesting thing that you brought up. I think one thing you missed was that you have to order between $50 and
Yeah,
$75 worth of things, so you don't have to pay
exactly.
18% VAT on top of that. But calling, should we talk about that a little bit? That is
Let's
like
do
very
it.
big in Israel, and it is great for a lot of reasons, and then it also can be difficult. I actually have a setting on my phone which I call only calls. I don't know if you could see
I
that,
see
but
it. Yeah, I got it.
basically, like, so if someone, um, calls or whatever, like I can still get it because someone might need to drop off a package or deliver
Yeah.
something or whatever. And, but I don't want to get anything else because there's like tons of WhatsApps and tons of like text messages or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's a very big calling culture. Have you experienced that as
100%.
well?
Yeah, massive calling culture, massive voice notes culture in terms of WhatsApp, like huge. I happen to like the calling culture. I'm not. I try to stay off my phone as much as possible, which is another podcast episode because I'm failing miserably at that. But I like calling because I think it's just like straight to the point. Get what you need. A lot of Israelis are very like tactless sort of people. So. Yeah, it doesn't really bother me. In fact, I'm so used to everyone calling that like I signed up. I started running pretty recently, and like I signed up for the Tel Aviv marathon. I ran the 10K. Don't worry, I didn't run the whole marathon, but I I was getting text from a random number and I was just like ignoring it. I was like, if it's important, they'll call me. And it was like literally details on how to pick up like my race kit to actually participate. And I completely missed it. And thank God, like I was able to show up and I got it on the spot. But my friend was like, you need to open those texts. And like I do not use iMessage anymore. Like WhatsApp me or call me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like it's in Israel because it's such a young country, and it's pretty tech forward. There's a lot of things that are different than in America. So everything is run by WhatsApp. That is basically your email inbox
Yeah.
in Israel. You do still get some emails, but you don't get that many letters. If you get a letter, it might be like 3 months after it was sent, so it's not that
Yeah.
useful. So you'll actually get a bill sometimes, for your electrical or whatever, and it already passed the date. So it's
Yeah.
like you gotta like pay attention to all the texts and the calls or whatever. And that's why I literally
100%.
have the setting only calls, because in America I was on do not disturb
Yeah.
for like a lot of parts of the day, because you can't get any deep work done if you're always kind of on social media and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment period, right? Because you have this
100%.
irking feeling of like, am I gonna get a call at any minute to go pick up a package? So
100%. I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second if you're cool with that.
yep.
I'm curious why, like, when you saw the message that I had sent out in the group chat, like, what part of that resonated with you? Like, what's your goal with this podcast? Like, what like excited you about it?
Dude, I didn't think about it with my head so much. I
Mm.
thought about it with my heart. That's how I kind of, same thing that you're talking about with the excitement, going after hard things. I didn't think about it that much. I figured, let me just talk to him. It's
Yeah,
going back to like, I'm trying to take the good parts of Israeli culture and integrate it into how I work. And a lot of that is not wait to schedule meetings and stuff
yeah,
like that and have it very structured of like, hey, someone sent you an email or a thing, just call. Like follow that path, see what happens. Because I thought about the worst case scenario is I met someone new in
yeah.
Israel. We had a short conversation, whatever, it didn't lead anywhere. But you really don't know like what paths will lead to what. So I was just interested and I thought it was cool. And I figured like, let me just reach out and let's see how this goes.
I love that.
Especially because I'm very new. So I
Yeah.
have some fresh perspectives, but it's always good to hear about someone who's already been here for a year and a half. And that's actually a question that I ask a lot of people when I meet them in
Mm.
Israel is like, what advice can you give to someone who just moved to Israel? You
Mm.
get very interesting, things. So I'll put you on the spot.
Okay.
What advice would you give me as new Alec,
Mm.
to Israel? I feel like quasi new, not like brand new, but still new.
Cool. I will. Let me think of something. Also remind me. I want to go back to the previous point you said because it really resonated
Yeah,
with
yeah,
me.
go for it.
Um, so what advice would I have for someone who's brand new? I actually hear that question a lot, whether like on LinkedIn or on WhatsApp or people that I meet. And like I'm still considered a newbie. For
Hmm.
people, listening a year and a half, you're probably thinking you just got here. Um, Number one, cliche, but you got to learn Hebrew if you don't already know Hebrew. And Hebrew school Hebrew or like your mono-Orthodox day school education Hebrew is not going to cut it. Like you really need to invest in a good ulpan and like you want to be integrated into the culture. I know RBS might feel like a little bit of a bubble sometimes, but like Hebrew is very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even just from like a cultural perspective, like
Yeah,
you can't hang out with people who mostly speak Hebrew and kind of have good connections if you can't express yourself. I think that's hard for a lot of people. I don't think it's a reason not to move to Israel.
100%.
But definitely like if you're here, if you're new, like just continue to pick up words. And honestly, it's a lot easier to learn Hebrew here than in the US, right? Because your exposure is very basic grammar, maybe
100%.
trying to read Hebrew books. Like you really don't use it as much. So, I mean, here it's even easier.
100%. The other tip that I would give, also another cliche, but it's so true, especially in Israel, like the some of the rules are bendable. And I'll explain what I mean by that. You Israel is very much a culture of not what you know, but who you know. And like that's sort of the way I operated in America, like very much a networker, like getting in the right rooms, meeting the right people. for like the right content, like intentions. Like you have to have good kavanah when you do this. But in Israel, just because someone like says no, or just because like something doesn't seem available to you, like if you're applying for a job and it says you need certain qualifications and you don't have, like it's expected here, whereas like maybe not in America or other places, that like you still shoot your shot and try and message the hiring manager or find another connection or another workaround. And like it works for bureaucracy as well. That's a whole other conversation, but you have to know how to shoot your shot here and get into the right rooms and meet the right people.
Absolutely. There's a big concept like in Judaism called siyata dishmaya, right? Like you have heavenly assistance for whatever you're doing, and that's actually goes back to what I was thinking when I felt like I was walking past that synagogue in early morning, saying I'm gonna move to Israel because God is always paying attention to everything that's going on in Israel, and you really feel that when you're doing all these networking and you're not bending the rules. It's just the rules are not actually defined as much because it's not as old of a country,
100%.
as the U.S. And a lot of times, people who are at these different rules or sorry, like offices or businesses or whatever, they have the power to make a decision. So,
100%.
you know,
I love that. And it is so true. I want to go back to something that you said, which really resonated with me, which is sort of like you thinking from your head, your heart, and not your head. And like I think it's, now that we're on the topic of Chassidus, I think it's the Alter Rebbe who says that like the biggest distance in the world is from the head to the heart. Might be another big Chassidic Rebbe. I'm not sure, but the point stands where like there's a huge gap and a huge distance from that. And the reason why I had the idea to start this really had nothing to do with my head, it had to do with my heart. Like we started the podcast talking about all these projects that I have going on. And like most of the things that I'm working on, I think we can be honest, like it is a working world. Like we need to be mafarnes like our families, and we need to make money and put food on the table and everything like that. So like most of it is thinking about, you know, profit and like revenue, whatever, however you think about that. This is definitely centered around something completely different, which is, I guess, like a different KPI that I have, which is that if one person listens to this podcast and because of that thinks that it's more possible maybe to move to Israel and to live here, or maybe they hear something that we say and they had a certain journey with religion and they're like, you know what, maybe I should reopen up the Chumash or like take a look at Tanya, or maybe I'll wrap tefillin today. Like to me that's a massive win. And like this is not a curative podcast, this is not like a Nefesh B'Nefesh Make Aliyah podcast, this is just a real authentic conversations. But if someone listens to it and feels inspired in a certain way, like to me, a massive win that's greater than, any sponsor we could land or anything like that.
absolutely. I totally agree. Actually, it kind of relates to something that I've seen kind of in Israeli startup culture versus American startup culture is like I find that in Israel, going back to the idea of kind of doing stuff from the heart and like seeing what works and the money will come later. And I've seen that in my life as well.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of like big scientific research and discoveries here. And I find that in startups, a lot of times they'll build this amazing piece of technology and they'll figure out how the business comes together and structured after that. I've seen that in Israel, right?
Yeah.
It's like we solved this crazy problem, but like we don't, but it happened in a lab and there's no like business or whatever. And then, but people see the potential in it because there are so many ways to apply it. And coming from the American startup space, it seems opposite. There's a lot more planning and financialization and figuring out how to raise capital and structure things or whatever.
Sure.
Not that innovation doesn't happen, but maybe on a per capita basis, they're pretty close. I'm not sure exactly the numbers there, but that's what I've seen in Israel too. It's much like, let's build the plane, and as we're flying, like continue to build it.
100%. I've seen that all the time here too. I think one of the biggest problems with a lot of Israeli startups is go to market is a little bit weak. That could be changing a little bit now, but like, and that's sort of like my background and where I come from. So one of the first things that like I was doing when I made Aliyah before I was at Beehive is like checking around different startups, and like all of them needed go to market help. I think like the cyber and like the deep tech AI, like all of that Israel obviously dominates in. It's the go to market approach that's a little bit a little bit weaker. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, but I think it's changing slowly but surely.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that they're so like research and tech driven, and that seems like it's kind of coming back in the US as well. You're seeing a lot more like hardware startups and deep tech and
Yeah.
people getting more interested in biology and chemistry and all those things versus just B2B SaaS or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, this is going back to a question you asked me. I'm curious your perspective on it. You asked, what advice I'd have for to someone who's making Aliyah that I've been here a year and a half. You're like fresh off the boat, 6 months. Like what advice would you have having, just done it?
Dude, I mean, I'm smiling right now, but honestly, smile,
Mm,
smile, right? Because that's what's going to help you uh, get open doors, meet people, get through some of the bureaucracy. A lot of things you'll come from an American perspective or outside of Israel perspective, and you'll be like, why isn't it done this way? And just don't let any of that get you down. So it's just like
mm,
very much keep moving. Don't get stuck in all the stuff that seems like it doesn't make sense. We don't have the reasons for everything. Sometimes, like, there is a reason for that. A lot of times there is not a logical reason for it. Like, why, if the Amazon, guy who's delivering the package, he has my address, why does he need to call me? Like, he
mm,
could just, come up. But, whatever it is. So just like smile, keep moving forward, and don't let everything drag your energy out.
mm.
Otherwise, you just won't have anything left.
I love that. It's smiling here is huge. I try to walk around smiling and definitely on Shabbos. I'm always smiling on Shabbos, no matter where I am. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, mix it up, keep people on their toes. But during the week I need to do a better job about that. Um and one of the things that I was curious, see, this is completely unscripted. We're sort of just going back and forth and are figuring out. But I'm curious the from that realization that you had when you were walking, you passed that shul, you were listening to like your friend Sheer, and like the realization to make Aliyah. What was that timeline like from when you landed at Ben Gurion? I made Aliyah solo, so it was like very easy for me, right? You have kids,
Yeah.
like you're married, so I'm curious like what that whole process was like and what the time frame was.
Yeah. So I talked to my wife about it and she said no. um, we had just got that house, got our house. We lived in it for about a year, kind of already fixed a lot of
Wow.
things, getting ready just to, live there for a while. And also my in-laws who are awesome. I have such a good relationship with them. Their house is 5 minutes away from our house, 5 minute
Wow.
walk. So this is like her dream, this is their dream, or whatever. But slowly but surely, she started to come around to it. And I engage in a lot of prayer
Mm,
to figure out how. I said like it's not in my hands. Like I know I want to do this. It talks about living in Israel in all of our literature, all of our prayers and everything. And so if God wants us to be back in Israel and
mm,
I want to as well, I know that it'll work out. I just don't know when. So that's kind of the mindset I had. And even though my wife didn't want to at the time, I said, "Hey, I'm going to start doing start taking action towards actually going." So at the time, my kids didn't have any passports. So I said, all right, my wife doesn't want us to go, but I can get them all American passports because they were very young at the time. But I was like, if I'm gonna have to get on that plane, they're gonna need passports. So I just
mm,
said, let me do that first step. And this is a big thing in Judaism and Hasidus, but even outside of Judaism, of like, you just take one step at a time. You start
mm,
building vessels, right? You start building, if you're gonna be provided with money, but like you have to create a business or you have to get a job or whatever. So that could be a vessel for it to come through. And you can create different vessels, but that was me kind of taking that desire, praying, not like saying it was going to have to happen on a certain timeline or whatever, but just start taking practical steps. And eventually she came around to it.
I love that. The one thing that came to mind right away is last year when I was sort of like fresh and new in dating, which like shidduchim or whatever, and that we could definitely talk about that whole chapter of life. Is it could be difficult. It could be very difficult. Like thank God I had it pretty easy relative to most people. I met my wife probably it was a few months into dating, so I was very lucky. Um, I remember I was at a shiur given by a friend of mine who gives a shiur on bitachon, and he basically was saying that exactly what you were saying. You need to sort of build the vessel for the shefa to come. So he gave us a challenge, and he said, think about something that you want in your life and take the first step towards it. So the example that he gave was, say you want to buy a new house, or you're looking at a new house or a new apartment, buy the bottle of champagne that you're going to celebrate in the house with, right? So
Yep.
like I was thinking about that. I was in dating. I am very, very connected to music. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down, and even though I'm not engaged and I'm definitely not married and I wasn't even seeing someone at the time, I was like, I'm gonna write down like the set list of the songs that I want at my chuppah. Like I'm gonna actually go ahead and write that down. And I think I went a step further and like started writing a list of friends that I wanted to invite to my wedding. And keep in mind, I was not even seeing a girl at the time, but it was just a way to like show Hashem that, I'm taking the first step for this. I have full bitachon and amuna that you're gonna introduce me to the right person at the right time. But I'm sort of giving you a nudge in the right direction and letting you know that like, hey, I'm preparing.
That's amazing. And for you, what was the timeline like from when you started writing that list to actually being there? And also, how was the champagne and how was everything?
It was quick. The champagne, I didn't buy the champagne because I wasn't looking at buying a new house or apartment. That was just the example that he
Gotcha.
gave.
Okay.
But the champagne, I'll let you know, let's say Purim, because we're recording this on Yud Aleph Adar, so a few days until Purim. And hopefully we're in a good mental state to do this next week as well. Hopefully the wine wears off. But it was pretty quick. I don't remember the exact time frame. That was sometime in maybe, I want to say, late May, and my wife and I met in like June, early June, and
Wow.
our wedding was 2 days after Yom Kippur, October 14th. So I don't remember if it was exactly end of May, but it was sometime in like the spring of this past year. So it happened pretty quickly.
It's amazing how those things work out. Now, it's also hard when you make those first steps and you're not seeing things start to happen, right?
100%.
And that's also bitachon of saying like, I don't know what the exact timeline is going to be. Maybe it's not the right thing for me.
Yeah,
Not in the case of like going to Israel or getting married, but in other things, right? Other jobs, opportunities, or whatever. And that's very difficult.
for sure. It's very difficult. That's where the real growth happens, but it is very difficult. It's it's hard to. We'll get deep and vulnerable in the first episode because why not? That's what we do. But I can tell you, obviously, I love being married. I feel very grateful and thankful. But one of the things that has been a little difficult for me is I felt a certain connection to God and really like dvekus, I would say, like when I was davening hard to like find my zivug, to find like my perfect match, right? And like when you want something really badly in life, like when you really want a job, when you really want a certain opportunity, you're gonna be naturally praying a lot more for that. And then when you finally get that thing, like you'll probably be very thankful and grateful, but it's hard to feel that same sort of connection when you're not constantly relying on Hashem to give you something.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when we feel a lack in some area in our life, that's what gets us to connect. So it could be that Hashem, God puts that lack into our life in order for us to connect, right? Or
100%.
to grow in some way, right? Because that's
Yeah,
like really what this experience is. It's growth, working on our character traits, trying to leave the world better than, when we came in. And yeah, it can be very difficult to experience those lacks. Um,
100%. Cool. I know we're coming up on looks like almost an hour here. Do you want to end us off with like to put you on the spot again? You have like a nice Purim Dvar Torah. Like what are you thinking about going into Purim? Like is there
Purim
anything
Devar Torah. I
that
have a very short thing. So in the very beginning, uh, in the Purim story with Achashverosh, who, if you look it up, I think the English name for him is like Artaxerxes. There's
I'm
more
not
than
gonna
one of them, so
pronounce
I don't
that.
know exactly which one, the first, the second, whatever. But Achashverosh is having this, huge feast. They're basically celebrating that like he consolidated this entire kingdom and the Jews are, exiled, and he thinks they're never going to go back to Israel and
Mm.
rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, the temple. And this whole thing happens where they all start drinking and they're all kind of debating, who has the prettiest women, like
Uh-huh.
very like crude, all this stuff. And so eventually, they say, okay, Achashverosh, who's the king who's running this party, is like, okay, well, my wife should come out. She's the prettiest, right? She's
Uh-huh.
kind of, and she decides she doesn't want to come out and kind of, see everyone there. And it says that he has a bunch of advisors, and he asks his advisors, like, what do I do? So if you look in the commentaries, it says he actually asked the Jewish advisors first, and they're like,
Mm.
crap, what are we going to say? Because if he says that, if we say, yeah, you should kill her because she disobeyed you or whatever, like that's going to be on us after he sobers up. He's going
Wow.
to be mad at us. And if we say, no, you shouldn't do anything, then he's going to be mad at us anyway. So they were kind of in this like catch-22 situation, and they were like, we're still mourning the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have settled mind. We don't really know what to do in this situation. So he moved on
Wow.
to his next advisors, and it lists all of the advisors. And the last one is Memuchan. And the commentaries say one of them is that it was actually Haman himself. And one of the interesting things we learn from Gemara Megillah is that the idiot kind of like speaks up first. So in
Mm.
terms of the order of it, he was really the lowest advisor of all them. And when Achashverosh said, what do I do in this situation? He jumps up first, and he's like,
Wow.
you gotta kill Vashti because she's not just a threat to you, she's a threat to every single household, where the women in the household are gonna be, upset at their husbands. They're not
Mm.
gonna listen to their husbands. Like it's this whole crazy thing. And so I think that's a little thing that I'm thinking about is like the idiot speaks up first, and you see this in negotiations too,
Wow.
right? Sometimes you don't want to say the first number, and you want to let people speak.
100%. Wow, that is amazing. I also think like the humility. This is like connected to some. I posted about this on LinkedIn today, but I was at a networking event last week, and it was almost a perfect correlation between the most successful people there, like objectively, just from who I know. We're talking founders with huge exits, huge investors, and like we went around to do intros, and all of those people gave the most humble intros. Like one guy was like, "Hey, my name is blah blah blah, and I work in tech." Like I knew, like he's probably the most impressive person there, and like other people there were like listing all of their accomplishments. It's like related that like sometimes the most successful people are the most knowledgeable people are like not going to be the first ones to come out with advice. They're going to wait to have Yeshuva Das, and they're going to be humble in it. So I love that. Super practical, also.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, I would love to just hear about. You said you like loved music. Maybe we can wrap up with that. And
Oh
because I
my
see you got the
gosh.
piano, you got the guitar. I have the guitar, but I don't take it out enough,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But like, what's the story there?
Yeah. I think next episode, it would be cool to like dive into a little bit of our journeys because I didn't grow up religious, but music was a big part in like my journey, like coming to like Orthodox Judaism. And I, I'll actually, just because Purim is right coming up, I'll say something quickly, very related to this, and then maybe we could leave that for next time as like sort of a cliffhanger. But one of the things that I heard this, and like because of my relationship with music, it was so strong and chazak for me, is that we all know about the Purim, story starts off with this massive party that Achashverosh is throwing for a full year. It says he had this party, and it talks about, of course, all of the food and all of the wine and all of the women. And the one thing that it doesn't mention is music, like, which is pretty bizarre. Like, what do you mean?
Mm.
How can you have a party without music? Like, it's not a party. You ever like go to hang out with your friends like at a party or whatever, and like someone turns like unplugs the aux? Like it's just awkward. What are you doing? And I remember I heard this, and like it really changed my whole perspective on music since. And also Rabbi Nachman talks a lot about the koach of music. I know you're a shtickle Breslover, so we have to get into that. But Achashverosh, basically, like the reason why he didn't have it is because Achashverosh and his advisors weren't stupid. They were smart people, and they knew that there would be a lot of Jews there partaking in the party. And the reason why they were having this feast in the first place is because, like, the Jews had not yet gone back to Israel and built the Beit HaMikdash, which they thought after a certain amount of years would happen. But it says that Achashverosh, I don't know who says this, maybe it's just a Hasidic guy who came up with this idea that I love, but it's like that if Achashverosh knew the power of music, and he knew the power of music and
Mm.
what it could have on a Jewish neshama and a Jewish heart, and he knew that if he had music in the party, the Jews that were there would hear the music and they couldn't stop thinking about the Beis Hamikdash, and they couldn't stop thinking about Israel and their return to Israel, and he knew that would end poorly for him, which I think to me like that's so strong because whenever I hear music, whenever I'm stressed, whenever I'm whatever, like I put on some music, especially Jewish music, and it takes me to a different place.
Amazing. I have so much I want to, say about music and hear from you on that, but that's like maybe a good topic for next time.
I love
I
it.
actually named my business Good Vibes because like that's to me music is everything. If you think about quantum mechanics and string theory, it's all everything is vibrating
I
strings.
love it.
Like everything is music. Otherwise it's noise. Music is picking out all the good points.
100%.
So maybe that's something to vibe on next time, pun
I'd love
intended.
to. I'd love to. So, anyone listening, I have no idea if we put this out, if we didn't put this out, where we put this out. I'm gonna speak to Jake about all those details, but really appreciate you sticking on. We still do not have a name for this podcast, so any ideas or topics you want us to talk about, or any other thoughts, please let us know. And yeah, Purim Sameach.
Yeah, Purim Sameach. Thanks so much for setting this up, and yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.